You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast. So you are in the book business. You're in or I should say, the business of helping other authors and sharing and passing on the wisdom of other authors, which I think is such a beautiful business model. And congratulations on your success and helping, spread these amazing ideas. We are in an information age, and it's a very powerful thing that you're up to, which is very cool. How did you get into it? What was the inspiration for you to get started with this?
Well, once I started sharing the books that I was reading online, I started to connect with a lot of like-minded people. And so the audiences on social media started to grow. And the first successful form of monetization for my business happened because authors started to reach out and say, "Hey, Nick, your audience is my target reader. You're reviewing books. I'd love to pay you to review mine." And I was like, whoa, I could get paid to read books. That's pretty cool. And, I was reading a lot of books about business and personal development, and you're taught as a small business owner to follow up with clients and say, "Hey, is there anything else that I can help with related to book PR, book marketing, podcasting, anything in between?" Because I wanted to do this full time. I was working a full-time sales job at the time that was not in the book industry, but I wanted my little side hustle of BookThinkers to become a full-time job. So that's really how it went from an interest into a business. And from there, over the last few years, we've grown to a full-time team of 10, believe it or not, and we work with hundreds of authors a year. So it's been a really fun journey, and most of what I've tried to do has failed. Only a few things have succeeded, but thankfully we were able to build a business out of it.
You only need one. Isn't it kind of crazy how that one idea can absorb all the other losses and then still provide a ton of abundance?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, Michael Gerber in his book, The E-Myth Revisited, says that 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. And
Mhm.
when I think about BookThinkers as a business, I think about it as 10 different business attempts. The first 9 failed, and really only the 10th succeeded. So it is funny how that works.
That's a smart way of looking at it. My father got into business and did very well, and I was always amazed at how one simple idea that he patented, it really did absorb a lot of other ones that didn't work out so well. I mean, he had other successes too, but that one idea just provided so much abundance and was able to, yeah, uh, allows you to test these other ideas. And it's funny because sometimes if you had hit it out of the park on that first one, then you did get, the golden touch syndrome. You think everything you could do was perfect. So it's kind of nice to do it on the 10th one, have a little humility going into the next ones.
Yeah, it is. And entrepreneurship has just taught me that it's through failure that you learn the most, and not to avoid failure, but to embrace failure and discomfort, and then sit back and reflect and learn and grow. And yeah, I owe pretty much everything to all of the failed attempts at growing a business.
Well, you've mentioned to me offline and on your socials as well that purpose comes from pain. And if you're willing to, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but what's been some of your biggest obstacles that you've had to go through, and how has I'm trying to look for the right word, outside of advice, but the inspiration and the insights from these best-selling authors, how has that served you in those moments of pain and challenge?
When I was in my late teens and into my early 20s, I was operating from a place of ego on one side of the spectrum and a lot of insecurity on the other. And so what I mean by that from an ego perspective was that it would represent itself at the expense of everybody else. I was not the nicest guy. I was not focused on service to other people. I was a go-getter and not a lot of fun to be around. And so that wasn't a healthy place to operate from. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I had all these insecurities around my ability to communicate, around how I looked, around how I sounded, around who I was. And so that's a tough spot. I think a lot of people can relate to one or both of those things, especially in your late teens and early 20s, as a motivated young professional who just couldn't figure anything out. And so I started reading all of these great books. And in a very short period of time, I was able to remove a lot of my ego, find new language around how to remove ego and become focused on impacting other people, being of service. And then from the insecurity perspective, remove a lot of that insecurity, gain confidence, gain certainty and control, fulfillment. And so when I say my purpose comes from my pain, like books have helped me solve a lot of discomfort, insecurity, ego related issues, which would hurt relationships and pretty much everything else. And they did so in such a short period of time. So now I'm motivated by the idea that the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. It can solve their pain. And it's happened so many times for me, but also for friends and family and people in my community that at this point, I believe it with my entire being. The right book at the
Mhm.
right time can change your life. And so what's my purpose? To help other people go through that same transformation that I was able to go through. And yeah, growing a business, I've experienced a lot of pain, short temporary pain from the business, mistakes I've made, issues I've gone through, and books have always come in to save the day, reading about how to overcome those obstacles and things like that.
Is that typically your first your default mechanism and when you hit an obstacle, like, oh, let me search my bookshelf to find an answer here, or do you seek out mentors, or what's your process for getting unstuck?
Yeah, a little bit of all of those things. What's great about a book is that oftentimes they condense decades, literally decades of lived experience of overcoming obstacles into days. And so if you can find a book that focuses on the specific problem that you're trying to solve, there's a great chance that that person overcame it and they could teach you how to overcome it too. I think the same thing with mentorship. I think books are a form of mentorship for me, but in terms of in-person mentorship, same thing. If
Mhm.
somebody's developed a relationship with me over the years, they kind of understand who I am, what I'm trying to do, the problems I'm facing, and they can make recommendations for me, then there's a good chance that it'll work out. Especially if your mentor has done what you want to do, and here's the focus point, and they've helped other people get from where you are to where you want to go. So it's not enough, I think, just for them to have done it, but a good mentor knows how to help other people do it too.
That's a very key insight. One thing that I would add to that as well, in my personal experience, is that sometimes you can find a mentor that is where you're at, has helped other people like yourself get there, but may go about doing it in a certain style or a certain methodology that is not overlapping your personality type. And I've made that mistake a couple times where I find a mentor that I think is
Mm.
going to help me get from point A to point B, and it's like they check off all the boxes, and then I get, a third into the mentorship, and I'm just like, oh, I just don't think like them. I don't approach like them. I've actually gone through this relatively recently where I've gotten some financial coaching, and the methodology that this one mentor applied, I thought was going to be supplemental and complementary to the way that I went about it. And I was like, oh, his strength is my weakness, right? So that's going to pair well together. And man, it just is laborious getting into it because he's so, you know, meticulous and fine tuned. And I'm more of a macro guy, and like throw me in the deep end, I'll figure out how to swim. And it's so funny because I spent a lot of money on that mentorship. Meanwhile, I finally reached out to another friend of mine who's doing the same thing, but he's so unorthodox. But dude, I learned more in a lunch with him than I have with thousands of dollars with this other mentor. Not to say that I haven't gotten good value out of it, because it has actually helped me get more meticulous and more disciplined, et cetera. So there has been value in it, but it's been a real struggle. So I'd add that to that as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that happens with books as well. I mean, oftentimes I'll read something from somebody that I disagree with, and I didn't realize I disagreed with them or that they went about life in a different way or from a different perspective until you dive in. But yeah, same kind of thing happens.
Yeah. What's been one of the biggest books that's influenced you the most? I'm sure you get
Oh,
that question
I
quite a
mean,
bit.
yeah, there are so many. I'll mention one that I read last year, which had a tremendous impact on my business and my confidence as a business person, allowed us to scale tremendously within the course of just the first few months after reading it. And that was $100 million Offers by Alex Hormozy. Alex writes at a third grade, maybe fifth grade reading level, which is really cool because he's a very successful business person, but he's taking these complex subjects and distilling them down into like no nonsense, very easy to understand and implement frameworks, exercises, concepts. And so I read that book, and after going through all of the exercises and frameworks and stuff, I built a new service for my company. that was 5 to 10 times bigger on an average deal size than anything I was currently offering. And I started to sell it like crazy and provide value and hear feedback from my customers. Hey, this is underpriced. Like, what a cool place to be. And it was all because of that book. And so that book allowed me to hire more people, grow my team, service more people at a bigger level. And when you think about what kind of an impact a book can have, I mean, it's been hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last year and a half of additional revenue because of a book, a $20 book. I mean, it doesn't get any crazier than that. So yeah, I owe a lot to Alex, and that's one of the best books I've read in a few years.
I have it. I haven't gone through it just yet, but man, it's been making the rounds. I see it. Obviously, he's crushing it right now on the social game, and he's got a book launch, and he's done very well with that. I've seen him everywhere. You can't log into anything these
Yeah.
days and not see him if you're an entrepreneur anyway. But yeah, that's awesome. Would you mind sharing like what was one of the lessons that you got out of that helped you scale?
Oh yeah, I don't mind at all. So Alex teaches a value equation. And in this value equation, there are 4 different variables. And one of the variables was like the perceived likelihood of achievement. And so if you could essentially build a guarantee around your offer that increases the likelihood of achievement, and that can happen a few different ways. And if you combine all of them, it's great. It can happen through testimonials. It can happen through money back guarantees. It can happen through providing data and more certainty around your offer, but just like the exercises around building a new offer, I think, and then incorporating everything around offer structure, like it was just home run after home run. I'll give a more concrete example. There was in the offer creation section or the service creation section, he gave an example. He said something like, spend 60 seconds and write down every single way that you think you could position selling a brick. So you go through and you write for 60 seconds. A lot of normal things come to mind. And then he says, well, it's all about the questions that you're asking yourself. What if the bricks came in any size? And then all of a sudden you're thinking about huge bricks, and all of a sudden these different service ideas come up. And then he's like, well, what if they came in different colors and different materials? And now all of a sudden you have all these other service ideas that you can come up with. And so he tries to get you to do the same thing with the services that you offer. Get outside of your own thinking, get outside of the box, ask yourself some different and creative questions. And so that's what I did to come up with some of the new services that BookThinkers offers. And then you go through kind of the like, how do you increase perceived likelihood of achievement? How do you build a guarantee that makes sense? How do you increase speed of delivery? And so all of these things became very important in the new service that I was building. And it just, like I said, it just helped us grow so much.
For listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.